Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome everybody into this afternoon's webinar where we're going to spend some time talking about new features specifically in our Writer version 2.3. As we're recording this webinar on September 25th of 2018, the current release version of our Writer is 2.3.21. So I'm going to take just a moment here, go up to my help at the top of the screen, go ahead and click on About. That's the version that we're working with, 2.3.21. So this is a current release version. Anything that we talk about through the morning's or through this afternoon's webinar is available in general release as we speak. I'm going to close back out of my Help and About window. So version 2.3.21 is the version we're working with as we go through this afternoon's webinar. We're going to start out with a couple of the more obvious or apparent differences or additions with version 2.3. I'll start in the far upper right-hand corner. Got icons here for the time clock and the daily summary. Long-term users of our Writer probably familiar with using quick functions to go ahead and find either the time clock and or what's called the daily summary report. What we've done is we've exposed those out on the main toolbar. Again, this is something that was relatively well hidden. So again, if you weren't familiar with using quick functions, again, you click on the time clock. It'll take us out to our time clock that we've had in the system for quite some time. And the daily summary report is one of those that's relatively well hidden, but again, exists going back even into Gen 1, where if I just want to know, well, where am I at for the day? What the daily summary report does is it looks at our work in progress window. I've got 9 open repair orders, and then we have 1 finalized repair order that we've done so far today. What it will do is it will group them based upon the status. So you'll notice I've got 1 that's on hold, and there's the dollar amount associated, 2 that have been dropped off, 3 that have been inspected, and again, there's the associated dollar amount with each. So as it sits right now, I've got $2,474 in outstanding business for the day, but to this point, only $149.97 in finalized repair orders as we go through. So again, exposing these time clock and the daily summary, the functionality themselves, not different than they've been for quite some time. However, adding those to that top toolbar. I do have 1 extra icon that probably or may not exist on your toolbar if you went back and looked at your RO Writer version. That's for Smart Status. Smart Status, not new with 2.3. RO Touch and Smart Status as applications that work with RO Writer were introduced, or they are compatible going back to version 1.29. Smart Status is our texting application. If you're interested in learning more about Smart Status, we've got a webinar scheduled here in a couple of weeks' time, where there's actually already a recorded webinar out on the YouTube channel that talks about Smart Status, some of the functionality, what it brings to our Writer. So again, the first or most obvious change would be those icons to the upper right-hand corner. As I look at my estimates in progress and my work in progress windows, one of the other things that we've done is we've broken out the comments and the status. Particularly, it pertains to the work in progress screen, not the estimate screen. You'll notice I've got a comments box. I've also got a status column in here, and I've got the same. The status on the estimate is always going to be open. We assign statuses to work in progress tickets, so not a big deal in terms of changing that on the estimate screen. But if you go back and you look at earlier versions of our Writer, this comments section was always the comments and or the status. And what it would do is, if there was a status assigned to the transaction, it would display the status. If there wasn't, then it would show you what was in the RO Notes section. So in this case, with Brent Allen and his '07 Chevy Malibu, what I'm really talking about is I've got a status associated with it. It's inspected. And then also, if I looked at the notes section, I've got RO Notes that are associated. Again, on older versions of RO Writer, the status would supersede the notes, so I couldn't see those without actually drilling in progress ticket. We've now opened that up so that now you have an additional column. The column sets, or the way that you turn them on or off, hasn't changed. But again, anytime we talk about modifications to this window, it's at least worth taking a moment to talk about, well, how do I define what columns actually appear as I'm going through that list in either the estimates in progress or the work in progress window. And it doesn't matter where you do it, just anywhere in either window. If you right click, then it takes us into the configuration screen for our estimate or work in progress window, where if I said, well, I'd like to add in profit center as a column, I could check that box. We're not using the estimate authorizations functionality, so I'll turn that one off and then click on set. If I wanted to apply filters, so only show me this service writer, this profit center, and have those filters be stored and saved, and I could add those filter parameters into the system as well. So again, I've gone ahead and I've added in a couple of columns, or I took one away and added one in. And again, just by right-clicking in those windows is how I get into the configuration section. Go ahead and define that column set and then also associate filter parameters. Again, that behavior, not new with 2.3, but the ability to segregate out the comments and the status is a new function that we've added with 2.3 as we go through. So those are the two most apparently obvious as we're looking at our main screen. The next one I want to talk about is over on the left-hand side toolbar. It's actually 3 new icons, or I shouldn't say 3 new, 2 new and 1 different icon as it relates to 2.3. The 2 new ones are the IMC catalog and then the repair link integration down here in the bottom of my catalogs section. We've got a number of different what we call punch out catalogs. And we call them that because we're essentially leaving our writer and we're punching out into this third-party catalog integration. And again, not new that we've got those catalog integrations, but both IMC and OE Repair Link are new additions. Again, IMC, we got a lot of customers that are using that, as a parts supplier and would like to use that as a primary catalog resource beyond just adding them into SmartyCat. And then OE Repair Link is really going to give us more inroads into the dealer space. A lot of dealerships in terms of exposing their inventory, pricing availability, and online ordering are using OE Repair Link as their connectivity method. So now I can get out to those dealer spaces where we've had a fairly limited availability with a lot of dealerships as far as that's concerned prior to the introduction of OE Repair Link. Again, going back to my statement from earlier, we've got a webinar scheduled for this coming Thursday. So for those of you with me live on September 27th, where we're going to look deeper into both the IMC and the OE Repair Link integrations, talk a little more about exactly what those are all about, and take a look at how they actually function inside of our writer. We also have a webinar specifically to talk about the service intervals functionality. Again, this was completely rewritten with Gen 2 of our writer. For those of you that have been using our writer for a while, you're probably familiar with the LaserCat catalog. What I mean by that, it may not be something that you are familiar with by name, but you're familiar with it by function. What I mean by that is, Epicor's catalog that we use as the parts resource, the part and labor resource for SmartyCat also has a standalone user interface called LaserCat. There were a number of different aspects in our writer that took advantage of that LaserCat catalog over the course of time. Most notably, not only the service intervals, but the tire fitment guide, as well as the specifications that we were pulling up. We were using the old LaserCat catalog. What we've done is we've moved away from that as a necessity, and we've brought all of the functionality into our writer. What that's really allowed us to do is to greatly expand the functionality. I'm going to pull back up a transaction here. We'll click on David Clark and his 2008 Ford Escape. I was going to click on that service intervals icon. Again, versions prior to 2.3 would actually launch into, again, what's called LaserCat. So Epicor's user interface for accessing their data. With 2.3, we brought service intervals forward, and it now falls into the SmartyCat umbrella. So as I launch out, it wants to know, does it have automatic transmission? We'll say that it does. Does it have four-wheel or all-wheel drive? Again, we'll say that it has that as well. So the vehicle-specific conditions, what you're going to notice is it now comes up and it says, well, here's the information that we've got available in the Epicor catalog. So they have mileage interval data, and based upon the current mileage in the system, we're going to pick the closest one and have that automatically pre-selected. They've got time-based services. They have additional items that are recommended by the manufacturer on whatever given basis. And then they also have periodic mileages. So meaning, and not at 30, 60, 90, but do this every 30, do this every 60. So again, depending on the vehicle, this window is going to change dynamically. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to pull out of this transaction here. I'm going to pick a different vehicle, an 03 Honda Accord. I'm going to go back out to service intervals in the upper left-hand corner. Now, purpose or intention today isn't necessarily to dive into service intervals. We're going to do that. We've got a webinar scheduled also for this coming Thursday where we're going to talk about a lot of the new functionality or what we can do within the service interval functionality. But you'll notice, again, the window changes dynamically based upon the vehicle that we've selected to display, well, here's what we have available in the Epicor catalog. In this case, just a time service and mileage intervals. Also, I can toggle from normal to severe, depending on what I'm looking for. If I wanted to see more than one, I could check more than one service over here on the left-hand side. Then if I wanted to see what's actually behind that, we'll add the 36 months in there just for good measure and click on OK. So it's telling me that, well, the 120,000 was what was checked by default, and here are the different elements that are included. You'll notice air filter, cabin air filter, oil filter, all listed in bold. And that's because if I wanted to, I could have the system immediately resolve, well, what is the appropriate part number for this 03 Honda Accord? So anything that's in black is an element that we're going to resolve and find the vehicle-specific part number as we go through. Again, there's my 60,000 mile service, and then further down, we'll see I added in, I apologize, there's my inspection items. There's my 30,000 mile service as well. So if I wanted any of these to actually go through and add on to the ticket, I simply check the box. And then when I click on Go, it's going to look for, again, any of the vehicle-specific pieces that are related to that particular service. So again, we're going to deep dive into service intervals, talk more about some of the options and some of the functionality that's inherently available as part of the service intervals piece. But one of the big new features or changes with Gen 2 or 2.3 more accurately is the ability to have integrated service intervals through Epicor that actually go through and resolve vehicle-specific parts. So again, I've got my air filter. If I was to click on next, the next item it's looking for is the cabin air filter, and it so on and so forth through all of the different elements that we're looking for. Cabin air filter at the local store, and then now that we get to our oil filter, I can see what's in my local inventory, got one that's appropriate, and then finally in my parts and labor tab. I'm going to replace my predefined description here as I add the parts and labor to a new job and click post and exit. It's asking me if I should ignore the 60, the 90, the 120, the 36 months and add this back onto my ticket. And there's my 30,000 mile severe service for that Honda Accord, along with all of the descriptive details that were out there on the Epicor catalog side. So one of the big new features or additions with 2.3 is that service intervals piece that we've added. Now I was in SmartyCat and I jumped back out for just a moment. I'm going to go back in and talk about, well, there's a couple of changes out here in SmartyCat that are worth mentioning as well. We were moving away from using the LaserCat interface as our primary, as the behind the scenes way that we were finding a number of different pieces inside of our writer. I'm going to go ahead and just look up a set of brake pads. So I'm looking for the parts to go ahead and replace the brake pads on this 2003 Honda Accord. So if it's front disc, rear drum, and then it's going to go through, just as SmartyCat always has, querying my vendors for pricing and availability. A couple of differences or nuances here. Notice the icons have changed slightly. So again, as you see them coming back in, you'll see reds, you'll see yellows, and you'll also see greens. The difference between the three is a red indicates that they didn't ask the vendor, or we were unable to get a response back from the vendor. Yellow would indicate that we've asked the vendor, we've received a response, however, they don't have any parts available based upon the search parameters we've put together. And green indicates to me that this vendor responded as well as they've got some parts available. So if I expand the vendor. So again, you'll see a slight change or difference in the nuance there. Again, red, yellow, green versus older editions or iterations of SmartyCat were just red and green. No real way to know necessarily if I did or did not query the vendor. Again, yellow will indicate to me that I queried the vendor, but no parts were available in this particular instance. A couple of other additions in this window as we look towards the top. I've got now an option there for what we call interchange and an option there for buyer's assist. And we're going to poke at both of these a little bit as we go through our service intervals conversation. But these are facets of the old LaserCat catalog that you have the opportunity to take advantage of. So it's not that they're new functionality, it's just now under the our Writer umbrella in SmartyCat using our Writer's screens as opposed to the old Epicor user interface. What interchange is interchange would allow us to put in a known part number. So if I said, well, I'm looking for part number S16, which is an STP oil filter, and I want you to tell me what would be the equivalent from some of the different manufacturers that I'm looking for. Well, in this case, it's saying that, well, this is the interchange. It's an M1-204, so that's what would replace it. Where we find this to be most helpful would be for OE parts. So I took the old part number off, and this is the OE part number. I'd like to know what the aftermarket part would be to replace that OE number. You could put an OE number in there and have it find our local vendors to tell me here is the part number that we're looking for. And again, in this case, I'll select my supplier from my list of available coverages to have it tell me which parts are available. Buyer's Assist, which you'll notice is great on my screen. I do that purposely, only because Buyer's Assist is a licensed feature from Epicor, meaning there is a small additional fee to use Buyer's Assist information. I believe the current pricing as we're sitting here on September 25th is an additional $10 a month. What Buyer's Assist is it's a reverse parts lookup. What I mean by that is, in most cases, as we're doing the search, we're putting in year, make, model, engine, and we're telling it, go find me the brake pads, and it tells you based upon that specific vehicle, here is the brake pad numbers that would fit from our individual vendors. Buyer's Assist kind of flips the search around. And what I mean by that is, you can put a part number in Buyer's Assist, and it will tell you what year, make, model, and engines that part would fit. So for shops that are stocking a high volume of inventory, I'm starting to see movement on this part. Let me see if it fits enough applications to justify putting it onto my shelf as part of my standard inventory assortment. So Buyer's Assist can help answer those questions. It'll also allow us to put a part number in. I apologize. Let me go back and let me restate that. So Buyer's Assist would allow us to do that reverse parts lookup, put in that part number, and then, like I said, give us a list of applications. It'll tell us how many applications it fits. So again, I've seen that filter now a couple of times show up on a transaction. I'd like to see exactly how many applications it fits to, again, determine whether this is a one-off or whether this is something that might become or continue to be more prevalent because it fits later model vehicles. Again, I had said before that Buyer's Assist is a licensed feature. If you have that as part of your Epicor license, the icon just lights up as you transition into 2.3. The easy way to tell if it's in your Epicor license, if you're on a version earlier than 2.3, just click on anything that takes you into the old LaserCat catalog. That icon that's just that kind of brownish square on your desktop would take you there. And when you get in there, there's a series of tabs. If one of them says Buyer's Assist, that means it's part of your license. Again, you could be using it. The functionality, not dramatically different through the old Epicor interface, but again, new added into our Wider, but it is a licensed feature, so not something we can turn on without going to Epicor and asking them to add that into your current subscription as we go through. So again, we've got our new integrations there. There's my OE Repair Link integration as well. As long as I'm in here, we're going to come here and do update coverages. Now I have a fairly long list of supplier coverages in my system. In most shops, this list is anywhere from 3 to 6 lines long based upon the different suppliers I'm connected to electronically. One of the connection types that you'll see if you look through my list is what's called next part. Now, next part, again, for those of you that go back in time far enough, next part used to be called wrench head. So again, when you see next part, next part and wrench head are one and the same. They rebranded themselves quite a few years ago now, maybe 5 to 7 or so, and their current name. But again, in a lot of legacy softwares and or in shops that have had users around for a while, the term wrench head still rings true with a lot of folks. One of the problems that we've always had with smart ECAT connections is getting what we call an accurate MCL file or manufacturer's coverage list from a next part supplier. Next part and or wrenchhead don't use Epicor as part of their cataloging solution. So in a lot of cases, we are trying to in some ways compare apples to oranges. We have now, working with NextPart/wrenchhead, built a portal, if you will. So if I'm a supplier that is subscribing to or using NextPart's services as my means to expose my inventory out to the internet so people can do pricing, availability, and order parts, we can now translate what their lines are available in NextPart in order to bring that down into our Wider. Now, it does require a little bit of work on the supplier side because the supplier needs to go in, again, using their interface, build the lines that they're looking for, but it makes it much more accurate when working with NextPart suppliers in order to find the appropriate and applicable lines and then continue to maintain those lines, carry them forward as vendors change their product assortments as we go through. So again, not a different button, not a different box, if you will, but behind the scenes, a little bit of different functionality that's, again, going to make that NextPart integration and any vendor that's using that more accurate as we go along. So back over into my repair order, one of the other things that I want to point out, or at least talk about as we go through, is what we're calling smart keywords. I'm going to click on labor, and I'm going to add a labor job onto a transaction. And in my case, we're just going to select my install battery smart job. So we added that labor on there, and then I'm going to click on OK at the bottom of the screen. At this point, see no difference in the behavior or functionality until I left click on that line to highlight it. So if you notice, there's a section up here that says keywords. 2.2 included smart keywords for parts. So if I highlighted a part and it was configured with a smart keyword, then I could go ahead and I could have it link out to the catalog and find that particular part. 2.3 adds the functionality for batteries. I'm sorry, for labor. So again, in my case or my example, all I do is I click on that smart keyword, takes me out to my smart ECAT catalog, immediately has the smart keyword associated. So it makes it much easier to find the specific element that I'm looking for. I know that this is my search term, and you could have more than one keyword assigned to an individual labor job, but all it does is it goes and it does a search for the specific term. Again, in this case, if I'm looking for a battery, we've got some coming back from my outside purchase vendors. We'll grab this first one in my list, click on next, and then as I get into, and I apologize, it's still trying to do my smart job. As I get to my parts and labor tab, I can tell it I want to drop that into my battery job, hit post, and now I've got the vehicle specific battery associated. You could do this, update the list as well. So again, smart keywords, what we really see or envision that as is a bit of an alternate to using smart jobs. I've got labor operations I've built in the system. Maybe I'm adding them through my service request tab, or I'm using tire quote that's adding a generic TPMS component kit, being able to quickly go out and find the vehicle specific part and add that back onto our transaction. So again, smart keywords were added to parts in 2.2, smart keywords now for labor, part of our new release with 2.3. Last thing I want to talk about is some of the changes we've made with tire quote. Now again, we're going to spend some time going through tire quote in Gen 2 in depth because it's dramatically different. In fact, I've said it before, I'll say it again. It is the one facet of Gen 2 that is completely rewritten from Gen 1, although I guess now service intervals falls into that equation as well. But I'm going to go over and hit tire quote on the left-hand side. Now again, the new tire quote with Gen 2, not my purpose or intention to go through and kind of explore functionality there. The tire Gen 2 will go ahead and it will automatically resolve size. There's a couple of new features as far as 2.3 is concerned. So if you're using tire quote, again, I'll point these out to you. We've changed the window. We've made it bigger, so we've expanded the amount of information that you can see. As it goes through and it's doing my search, it's checking not only my local inventory, but it's asking both in my case, Carroll Tire, pricing, and availability. So we'll give it just a minute. Come back and find its applicable numbers. So in this case, I've got a couple of these in my local inventory. I wanted to see what Carroll Tire has available, or ATD. I could click on both, and I can see what of my individual vendors have available. Now, that hasn't changed. That's still the same since we've introduced Gen 2. So again, when we get deeper into tire quote in our webinar on, I think it's either Thursday or a couple of weeks time hence. But what's new with 2.3 are a couple of different facets in here. Starting with, you'll notice this little icon up here, I term it a funnel. I'm not sure exactly what it's supposed to be. What that's going to allow us to do is to filter down the information. Meaning if I clicked on that there, it says, well, you tell me what filter criteria we'd like to apply. So I said, I'm only looking for tires with a 91 load index and or maybe an SL load range. And oh, by the way, I want to see Cooper, General, Goodyear, Michelin, and Toyo. When I click on save, it then applies those filter criteria. And you can see it's populating up here so that I can see here are the filter criteria I currently have applied with that little red X to the right, where if I say, you know what, let's take out the filter for load rating, then now it goes ahead and expands and it refreshes the data as we go through. So as you're looking for, well, you know, I need a specific size or a speed and load rating or any of the other available parameters, this makes it much easier to take that list of, oh, I don't know, it was 60 to 70 tires long that we started with and really drill down to the elements that are relevant as we go through. We've added this on the right-hand side where you can now more easily see the different specifications on that particular tire. And then as it relates to ATD, I click on the Images tab, the query out to ATD, and they bring us back an image of exactly what that tire looks like. Looks like we've got a couple of images that we can see. I've got image 1 and or 2 of 2. Don't really see a difference. Just go through my list and I continue to select the different tires. If I'm looking to show the customer a picture or looking to see a tread pattern, again, I can find those images. So that's new with 2.3. Again, tire quote itself, for those of you that are on Gen 1 or just moving over from Gen 1 to Gen 2, has been completely rewritten. We'll do a fairly extensive dive into tire quote in a later webinar, and we've got one out there recorded already on our YouTube channel. But new with 2.3 are our abilities to filter, the specifications that we see on the right-hand side, and then the images as they come back from ATD. So that brings me to the end of my content, at least as far as what I wanted to cover in what's new with 2.3. One last piece before I stop the recording and come back to talk to those of you that are with me live, and that is one of the things that you can also do from inside of any module of ROWriter is if you go up and you click on Help, and then you click on Help again, or you'll notice the keyboard shortcut is just F1, it's going to take you out to our page called docs.rowriter.com. This is a web page. It's opened up on my other computer, so hang on just a second. We'll bring it over. And you'll notice we've got our docs.rowriter.com page. As it comes up to the upper left-hand corner, what it's going to do is it's going to take you to the relevant documentation based on the version of ROWriter that you're running. Now, if you wanted to see what's new in 2.3, again, here's a high-level overview with instructions on how each one of these works as we're in 2.3, and we've got a fairly extensive document that talks about just our general release notes. So if you wanted to go back and review, get a little bit deeper into any of the functionality, I would encourage you to head out to docs.rowriter.com. You can get there through a web browser if you wanted to not be inside of the program, or if you're inside of the program and you click on Help or hit F1 from any of the modules, it'll take you right there as we go through. One last note or caveat as far as that's concerned. If you just go to the webpage, docs.rowriter.com, because you didn't start from inside of the program, it's going to take you to more of a general landing page. It doesn't know what version of ROWriter you were using, so you'll see information about 2.1, 2.2, going back into the Gen 1 series as well. So the benefit of going there from inside of the program is it can filter down and say, well, let me show you the most relevant information based upon the version that you're running, versus if you just go there through a web browser, then you're going to need a little bit more information and you may have to find what's appropriate based upon the version of ROWriter that you're running.